Hi, I'm Chris, the Education Manager from Rapid Education, and I'm here with Alex Saikia, and we are going to go through the new VEX Robotics Competition game Tower Takeover for the 2019-20 season. Now we're going to look at this as an overview of the game itself and look at some of the interesting rules, things that have changed slightly from previous years. We're not going to take a deep look into robot design. But we will have a quick talk about strategy and the sorts of things that teams can expect for this season. So just to get us going, I'm going to hand over to Alex and we're going to do a quick overview of our opinion of the game.
Okay. So I think with the game Tower Takeover, it's obviously split into two halves of the field bounded by a line down the middle. And you get both robots being able to start from your alliance on anywhere on that field wall. That's different from all the previous years where you've had to start on a bar or on your coloured tile. So that gives you a lot more options for your autonomous routines at the beginning. And then I feel that this the game's very simple, but the strategy can get very, very complex very quickly because you've got the ability to influence not just your own score, but the opponent's score as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is something that I really like about this game. Tactically, I think it's going to be a big level up from the last couple of seasons. Now, we've had some reasonably tactical games along the way, but the really interesting thing about this one is how quickly you can influence the entire score of the match at the end. So let's just give it a quick overview. So the idea of the game is that you need to build stacks of coloured cubes in the scoring zones. Each alliance has 2 scoring zones on the field. But the point value of those cubes is affected directly by how many cubes of the same colour are in a tower. And so there's towers around the field, 2 of which are alliance towers, so can only be scored in by the alliance of that colour, but the rest are a free-for-all. And so by putting the coloured cubes in those towers, you're directly increasing the point value of the cubes that are scored. And so right down to the last minute, teams can be having a look at what their opposition alliance is scoring, what colour cubes they're focusing on, and try and change the point value of those cubes in favour of whatever strategy they have chosen. So that is definitely complex compared to how the strategies have worked before.
Mm-hmm. So you've got 5 neutral towers which complete free-for-all for the cubes, and the beauty of this is that not only can you score in them, you can also de-score out of them. So let's say you've got a massive stack of purples, but the opponent's got a massive stack of oranges, and the oranges are all up top in these towers. You can just de-score all of these orange cubes and then suddenly score a bunch of purple cubes.
So that's interesting because Alex, can you share your screen and scroll to the bit in the manual that has got the picture of the cube in the tower? Because let's have the de-scoring towers is really interesting. How easy do you think it's going to be to take one of those cubes out of the tower, and how far nested? So there we go. This is an interesting image. So you've got your purple cube there, and that's one way of scoring it. So it's down below that kind of central line, which determines that cube is placed, and that can fairly easily be de-scored. But if it's fully placed, so if it's square in there, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not it's obviously possible to de-score, but are people's mechanisms going to easily be able to de-score, or de-score is probably the wrong term, but remove those cubes from the towers?
I'm not sure, because it looks like the cube, if it was flush in this tower, it would only have maybe an inch or so of white.
Yeah, it's not a lot to get hold of.
Yeah, to actually get to.
So that's interesting, and I think again that's a massive strategic move, because if you're intentionally placing cubes almost diamond shape like that purple one there, then you give yourself the ability to be able to remove that and change the point value in your favour. Whereas if you're putting them in square, I imagine you're kind of more committing to, that's the colour I'm going to leave that one, and you're kind of forcing your opposition to go a particular way and try and follow suit with the colours. So that, I think this is until we actually get our hands on the game elements and see that, it's going to be tough to call whether or not that's going to be possible. And I know teams will come up with a way of doing it, but it just goes to show that the strategy on this game is going to be huge.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at some of the interesting rules in the game that might vary from previous years, or that are specific to Tower Takeover. So go on, Alex.
Do you want to look at stacking here?
Yeah. Okay.
So obviously scoring all these cubes is the aim of the game in these goal zones, of which you've got two, one's slightly bigger than the other. One of the differences from something like last year's IQ game is that they all have to be flush with the floor. So you can see that here on my screen. So that's quite difficult. And it also means that you can't just overload the bottom of of what will eventually be your towers with cubes. You can only put, I think that will only fit two.
Is that showing the bigger one there or the smaller one?
That's the bigger one there.
But presumably the smaller one will also take two. So that's an interesting.
The smaller one, it looks like it can only take one.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean,
yeah, no, you might be right there, I think. Yeah. So that, the fact that they've got to be flush means that accuracy of placement is going to be really important. So you can't balance them on the perimeter of that scoring zone. That's going to mean that placing them is going to be really important. The other thing is they've got smooth surfaces. These cubes have got, when the faces are together, they're relatively smooth. They're not going to interlock with one another. So again, that's going to be important for placement.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of falling over towers.
Yeah, absolutely, and that leads us nicely on to the next point, which is descoring, and it's interesting because there is no descoring allowed as such in this game. So when I say as such, what I mean is you are not allowed. The rules explicitly state that you are not allowed to interfere with another team's or the opposition alliance's stacked cubes. So there we go. That's so SG3, and we're specifically looking at the F clause there. So you're not allowed to cause cubes that are currently scored to become descored.
Yeah, I also find it quite interesting that they've written this: may not intentionally or accidentally do any of this.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is much like in Turning Point. There was a similar rule with blocking a shot at the flags. That you could accidentally block a shot to the flag by being expanded. But it could be completely incidental, completely accidental. But that was an instant DQ. So that's similar in that respect. But I'm just reading that again, actually, and it says cause scored cubes within the opponent's protected zone. Now,
one of the goals isn't in the protected zone.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. Yeah. So can you descore the smaller one, but not the larger one?
You might be able to. In which case, one of your robots is going to have to be defending for the entire match.
So there you go. You've got that area there, which is not in the protected zone. So let's just talk about the protected zone. What is the definition of the protected zones?
So if I just scroll back up to definitions, here they are. So the outer protected zone, that's the three-dimensional volume extending upwards from encompassed by these taped lines here. So it's two squares and a triangle. And then the inner protected zone is simply the corner piece, the corner tile of the field. So I find it interesting that if any robot from the opposition drives into this inner protected zone at all, it's an instant DQ.
But the outer protected zone they can drive into, they just can't contact a robot that is fully inside that outer protected zone. Is that right?
Yeah, they're not allowed to do that. Scroll back down to SG3. Yeah, you are not allowed to contact an opponent robot.
Which is fully contained within the protected zone. And that's actually quite interesting because usually in the VEX competition, things are usually referred to with just contacting them in any way. So, robots were considered to be in the expansion zone as long as they were contacting it, for example. And in the days of having a parking bonus, things were considered to be parked as long as they were touching that starting tile and so on. But this is interesting because it specifically says contained fully within their protected zone, which is...
It's quite difficult if you're in the university division of the competition. Your robots are already the size of a tile.
So you're going to be contacting outside of that pretty much of the time. I think I'm trying to work out what the intent in that rule is. So I guess
it's if someone is scoring, obviously, and let's say you've stacked a lot of cubes inside your robot and you need to offload them, then that tower is going to be very unstable, and if you get hit while placing it, you're going to knock over an entire bunch of cubes. I find case B here quite interesting. It's contact any scored cubes in either of the opposing lines.
Right, okay, so that's not an instant DQ. So there we go, that's what we were just talking about. So you can't, so that is saying you cannot descore them, but that sort of incidental knocking over of those stacks in the smaller one is not an instant DQ, whereas the one in the protected zone becomes an instant DQ, which is interesting.
So again, if you knock over, if you knock over someone in the smaller unprotected zone, then
it's liable to be match affecting that, isn't it? Depending on the size of that stack. And so that's, I guess that's the definition there. But it's interesting, I guess the reason for that is because there is no protected zone around it. So people are going to be in that area of the field, and there is always the chance of robots getting pushed into the tower, etc., which shouldn't be allowed on the in the end with the protected zone. So there's some really interesting and very, very specific rules in SG3. Those are things that teams are going to have to be really mindful of.
Yeah, don't go near the opponent's protected area unless you're defending from.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so another thing that's interesting for this year, I think, is there's two things really. Possession. There's no, as far as we can see, there's no possession rule, so you can handle as many cubes simultaneously as you like. So that means that the robot can potentially build those stacks within it, much like, I suppose, with in
the zone.
In the zone, exactly. When you were carrying that mobile goal, you could build big stacks and then place them into the scoring zone. So it's similar with this. You can build the stack in the robot and then go and place that stack as one big scored entity, and that's assisted by the fact there's no expansion limit. There's no expansion limit either vertically nor horizontally once the match has started. So again, big robots, big tall robots that can hold large stacks of cubes can be made, and also quite exciting, I think, for this game. That opens up the possibility of something we haven't seen for a while, and that's the good old-fashioned wallbot.
Yeah, the wallbot is interesting. It's always been one of my favourites to watch. I'm not so sure of its effectiveness in this game, mostly because in past games where wallbots have been allowed, you haven't had the autonomous line to get in the way, and you always deploy your wallbot in autonomous so that you can get out in front of the other team. Because let's say you were let's say you were red, you'd want to go and put your wallbot across where my cursor is right now.
That's a great point. So, if you look back at the wallbots of Toss Up, or of I suppose there was wallbots of sorts in Starstruck as well. To block that entire fence, the width of the fence. But the point in deploying them was to do it in autonomous, and like you say, block those scoring zones before the other alliance has a chance to use them. And you've got two things here. Yeah, firstly, you can't cross that autonomous line. Much like last year, if you cross the autonomous line, you instantly forfeit the autonomous bonus to the other team. But also, there's multiple scoring zones. So whilst the one in the protected zone is clearly the most lucrative because of the additional size of it, there's still a scoring zone at the other end of the field, and it's going to be really difficult for a wallbot to completely disable scoring for a team. And I suppose it's the same with catbots. So if you think of what we mean by catbots, so trying to think of games where this has actually been a thing. I suppose Toss Up, it was doable, and also in going back a long way in Gateway. So where the objects were placed into some kind of scoring tube with a fairly small opening at the top, you could get a robot that basically just capped that goal off so that no objects could be placed into it. Now in this case, what can you cap off? You can only really cap off the towers, and there's so many of them. There's no feasible way that you could really make a massive difference to the game by doing that.
I've seen robots expand 3/4 of the length of the field, and they could, with some very intricate mechanism that you would struggle to pack down into 18 inches, you could probably cap off about 3 or 4.
Yeah, but there's still other places to score. If you think back, so a great example of catbots, if anyone wants to try and find these on YouTube. So there's a game called Sack Attack many years ago with a row of troughs across the middle of the field, alternate red and blue troughs the whole way across. And there were bots that expanded the full width of the field and capped all of the opposition's troughs. And so there was basically left them no way to realistically score. And that was a really good deployment of a catbot. But this game makes, I think, both wallbots and catbots very difficult. But there's huge amount. I mean, the lack of an expansion rule opens up huge amounts of possibilities. Tetherbots is another example. I don't really know how feasible that is with V5. It was probably a lot more feasible with Cortex. But Tetherbots was where you had a sort of a mothership robot that had the Cortex on it, and you could have a miniature robot that was basically on a tether, so long motor wires, and give you the ability to get out in the field and have effectively two robots in one. So you could almost have a 3v2 situation there. But I'm not sure with V5 how feasible tetherbots are.
I'm not sure on the rules of because if you did that, you would need cables that are incredibly long.
It's just entanglement, isn't it? So what people used to do was use their polycarbonate allowance to basically make a nice little anti-trip cover that kind of expanded over the cable. There's some really cool examples out there, but I think the cables with Cortex were much easier. The motor wires were much easier to extend with Cortex than they would be to have the big chunky V5 smart cables. Plus, also, what's the current over a wire of that length with the V5 motors is going to be interesting.
Yeah, probably not that great.
So Alex already touched on the fact. I think something else interesting is that we've still got the red and blue tiles on this field, but they're not used as starting tiles. So when you're starting a match, you are either which is, there you go, you've got SG1 for the definitions of how the robot needs to be placed at the start. But it's got to be contacting a field tile, so basically on the ground, not contacting a tower, not contacting any cubes other than the preload. But it just needs to be touching the perimeter wall on the side that your alliance station is on. So it gives you much more flexibility over your starting position, and I think that's going to bring the rule into play. So the right of the red alliance to place their robots last. In terms of what your autonomous does and the options that you've got for that, that's going to be really interesting, because those early strategies in the match, not just for winning the autonomous bonus, but also for setting the whole feel for the match of what colour cubes are going to be the most valuable for the rest of the match. That's really important.
Yeah, I think you're going to see the return of multiple. I mean, most teams have multiple autonomous routines, but multiple autonomous routines for each colour. There's going to be a lot more scouting involved this year, because the strategies are so different and they're so variable on exactly what your opponent is doing. You'll see everyone try, maybe in the first match of the day of a competition, they'll try something, and then they'll be watching every single other team to see what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the interesting thing here, so in autonomous, we talked about the 6-point bonus. Last year we had a 4-point bonus for winning autonomous. This season it's a 6-point bonus. Whether those extra 2 points, I think these matches are going to be higher scoring. So as a sort of percentage of the total score in a match, it probably doesn't make so much difference. But the really interesting thing about winning autonomous is you get access to those 2 additional purple cubes, the match loads. Now, if autonomous is tied, so we should mention, if autonomous is tied, then each team will get 1 of those purple cubes in the match to use as a match load. But if you win autonomous, you get both those purple cubes. And does that give you a massive advantage there to basically take ownership of the purple cubes? Now, if you're confident you're going to win autonomous, do you start stacking purple in autonomous use that extra? So basically, it gives you those 2 extra cubes during the match to get into the towers. And really take charge of the purple cube point value.
Yeah, one of the interesting thing about the way, if you see how the purple cubes are laid out right here, you've got, I think 6 available to you and just you during autonomous. But there's also all of these ones across the autonomous line that are free to anyone in autonomous. So you could go banking on getting those 2 extra purple cubes, and they would be a massive advantage. But if your opponent has gone and hoarded all of these cubes across the autonomous line, all of these purple ones onto their side, and maybe put them in their protected zone, then
it's a big gamble, isn't it?
You're helping your opponent there.
Yeah.
If you go for your autonomous,
yeah.
In which case, never you don't actually have to put them onto the field during drive control.
Because the field is symmetrical in terms of the cube positioning, but it's not symmetrical in terms of the cube colours. So orange cubes are biased towards the reds and this is in terms of their ease to score. So orange cubes are biased towards the reds. And green are biased towards the blues, and so there's kind of an intent in the game design there to guide both alliances on a different path. So I guess certainly in the early season, it's quite likely that blues are going to focus on green for those early easy points, and reds are going to focus on orange. And I think it's how the strategies then develop to benefit from what your opposing alliance is doing, in terms of how they're changing the point values of the cubes using the towers. That's going to be, if reds just focus on orange and blues just focus on greens, this is going to be a fairly standard kind of game, fairly standard match. It's the tactics there of how you benefit from all of the work that your opposition has done that's going to make it really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's very cool, just if everyone just focused on their colour cubes, as it were, so red go for orange and blue go for green, then the game is distilled down to who can get as many of their colour into the 7 high towers.
Yeah.
But as soon as you introduce the purple cubes, or maybe if you start stacking, if you're blue and you start stacking orange, or if you're red and you start stacking green, the game suddenly completely changes. But I don't think we'll see that for a while. I think at the very beginning we're going to start seeing people going for their associated cubes, and maybe going for a few purple ones as well. And I actually think maybe near the end of the year you might start to see the fields completely clear.
You think? Because that was going to be my next question. So because of the way this game will unfold, this is not a circumstance that's going to happen particularly often. But so, what is the maximum score that you can get in this game? What is the absolute maximum?
I believe it's somewhere in the realm of very low 200s.
So how many cubes of any one colour are there? 22?
Yeah, so there are 22 of each cube. I believe the best score you can get is if you score... Actually, no.
So there's seven towers.
Yeah.
So 15 scoring cubes of a given colour.
That's not the highest. I think the best way is to split. For the very highest scores, you split equally. So you go 4, 3, and then nothing.
Right. So you're not focusing on not putting all of one colour into the towers and then using the remaining 15 cubes to maximise the points. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The problem there is that in your goal zones, in your rectangular goal zone, which you can see my cursor pointing to, you can only fit 2 cubes, and here you can only fit 1, I think, which means you've only got 3 spaces to really stack towers. Which means that you're going to have an average cube tower height of about 20, and 20 times 5 inches. That's
especially with those, without any interlocking, that's not going to be a thing.
Yeah, that's very, very tall.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think what that summarises is the fact that this is not going to be the kind of game where anyone is going to be maxing out the score. It's going to be a game where the ability of those teams to focus on what their alliance partner is doing is just going to be so vast, because the way to win these games is going to be to tip it in your favour by controlling the towers. The game can really pivot so quickly.
I mean, I can see a game starting where all the cubes are stacked within the first half of the game, and then the rest of the game is literally just spent manipulating these towers.
There's 2 forms of manipulation, because of course you can change the scoring of your own stack. Whilst you can't descore your opposition stack, you can change the scoring of your own stack. So if it looks like, let's say you've focused on your orange cubes, and it looks like greens are going to end up with a higher point value, you basically do away with the orange stack and build a green one, and maybe 2 or 3 green cubes might end up outscoring a whole bunch of orange ones. And so the strategy in those last sort of 30 seconds of the match is just going to be huge.
Yeah, very. I think, for example, if I scored 2 orange, if I was red and you were blue, I scored 2 orange in my goal zones. So I've got 2 points, or let's say I score 8 orange. So I've got 8 points there. But then you score just two green cubes in your goal zone, and then you also put some in if you put just 2 up in the towers, you've suddenly got just as many points as... No, that doesn't work.
Because you get one more than in towers, don't you? So there, your greens are going to be worth 3. So you've only got to get 3 cubes in to get 9. 3 cubes in the stack to get 9, then, versus someone who's stacked 8 orange cubes with no tower scored. So yeah, I mean, it's you basically can minimise the amount of lifting work you need to do in terms of building towers. In terms of building stacks by focusing on getting those points in the towers. I'll tell you what, when I first saw this game, when I first saw the field layout before I read the rules, my first thought was, cube game. Stacking cube game. It's not going to be that exciting. But you look at this, and from a strategic view, I just think this is one of the best games that we've had in terms of strategy. So really, really excited about this one. I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant. I think the early season is going to be tough, but as the season progresses, there's going to be some incredible matches here where things change really, really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it's also good that the game is very simple to understand.
Yeah.
So it means that any teams coming in, let's say middle school teams, very young teams coming in, who might not have built a VEX robot before, if you build the basic clawbot, you can probably still do a bit. So these cubes have quite interesting divots in them, which mean that the claws can actually, I think, grab onto them, meaning that you can actually probably score them in your alliance towers and your goal zones.
And there's, in terms of the teamwork there's a lot to be said for, let's say a team have discussed their strategy and they're saying, right, well, we're going to score those purple cubes. A robot that is not so efficient at stacking and scoring can still be busily hoarding cubes to one side of the field, make sure they're in control so that their alliance partner, who might be a better, have a better lift, be a better stacking robot, can focus on just the final bit of the cube manipulation, but not have to worry about fetching them from around the field. So I think, again, it's another string to the strategy bow. I think that the teamwork side is going to be as big as it ever has been.
Yeah.
Cool. So is there anything else, Alex, that you can see in there that we should pull out? Any specific rules? What about skills?
Skills is interesting. So in skills, unlike with the basic game, we've got this not too many rules in here actually, or not too many changes of rules. This is the VEX U appendix. So skills, it's got a few modifications. So it's the usual, you've got a minute to score either with your joystick, so control driver skills, or programming to score as many points as you can. But what's quite interesting is this rule here, RSC2, which says that in all robot skills matches, the cubes are all considered to be the same color. So you don't have to focus on only scoring orange cubes so that you can only multiply orange cubes in your stack. All the cubes are the same color this time. So
that's similar to the mobile goals in.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that game called?
In the Zone.
In the Zone. Yes, the mobile goals and In the Zone. So in skills, the blue and the red mobile goals, they're all considered the same color, so you could score with any of them. And so similar thing here. So all the cubes are effectively the same color, and that will maximize the points scored in skills, which I think is pretty cool.
With the V5 system, especially with the vision sensor, I'm seeing programming skills actually being quite competitive this year. You can do quite a lot because your vision sensor will hone in on a cube, and then you have it, and then you just literally need to find either a tower or your goal zone.
Yeah, having those coloured tiles actually around the a goal zone is going to give a nice big target for vision sensors, because it's the only blue and red things on the field. So that's going to give you a nice big target.
Just make sure you're not wearing blue, red, orange, or green by the field.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, I think we have covered that in plenty of detail to get people started. I'm really excited for this season. Can't wait for those first few matches to get underway. So
I'm looking forward to refereeing this season.
I think this is going to be. There are some. There's those rules. There's those SG3 rules where there is going to be some DQs. I think it's inevitable. But this looks like a fun game. It looks like it's going to be a fun game for teams to play, and it looks like it's going to be good for us as event partners and volunteers as well for managing. So I'm really excited for this season. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up, Alex?
No. The VEX U division looks pretty cool this year. So just there are a few minor rule changes. You've got 24-inch robots, and 15-inch robots.
So that's a throwback to. I think that's how VEX used to be a long, long time ago.
Yeah, they had it this year for Turning Point. So instead of what you usually get in high school and middle school, where you've got 2 teams versus 2 teams, in the university division, you can actually build your own partner. So you get to build 2 robots, or as many as you like, and then field 2 robots, as long as one fits within a 24-inch cube, and one fits within a 15-inch cube. And especially with the sort of complexity of the strategy, your autonomouses in VEX U are going to be ridiculous, I think, because they are, instead of the usual 15 seconds that you get, they are now 45 seconds.
Yeah, and I think it's great to see a game that has potentially some really exciting autonomous. I think, Skyrise was great for autonomous. You look back at some of the VEX U autonomous from that season, they were brilliant. So hopefully we'll see some similar things. Well, that's on you, Alex, as a VEX U team. This is on you to deliver something incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's good that we have about 7 programmers on our team.
Awesome. Okay, right, we're going to wrap it up there. So thanks very much to Alex for going through that with us. And we both look forward to seeing you at events throughout the season. So good luck to everybody.